What is happening, everybody, man? Thank you jumping into another session of Expert Mentors Live, episode 270. What the hell are we at? 273. Holy smokes, Bobby. Brother, wow. You know, it's been a minute since we've had you on.
Yeah.
Back in August of 2019. What the heck have we been doing?
That was that. Wait, we went on when we were in Scottsdale or something, or we were in another place.
Yeah, you
were outside.
Yeah, we're somewhere else. I don't even remember. Been a minute. 200 episodes later, and
let's do it.
You know, I can't believe it's been that long, but something really, had kind of resonated when we were talking. One, I want to hear about this bourbon thing that you got going on, for sure. We definitely want to talk about that. But something really kind of resonated, and I know the bourbon thing is also an investment thing, opportunities that come. And I think I was sharing with you, we had the build events earlier this year, and Kurt Shewell held Build Detroit, and so was able to get up there for Kurt, and just being able to stay there for day one. And I think the best, obviously, he had Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. So he had Chris Voss, the bourbon deal, kind of what you're doing. And it was great hearing Chris speak. But Mark Z went right before Chris did, and I think Mark had one of the most important presentations, one of the most important conversations that real estate agents must hear. And I'm of this strong belief of how real estate teams and companies need to be thought about moving into the future. And we've sold a brokerage. You would laugh if I told you what we sold it for. Number one in the world for Caldwell Banker. You would laugh if I told you what we sold it for. And you see that all along, right? Unless you're going to build an Ebby Holiday, or you're going to build, to get consumed, to get acquired, to get gobbled up. But that takes years and years to be able to go down that path. And so I'm just of the belief that a real estate company, a real estate team is best served to create opportunities for investment to truly build wealth. I think it's more of a mining system of opportunities that you've got to be able to identify that aligns with you. And you're like, bro, I got you. Like, this is exactly where my head is what I've been working on. And so I've really been looking forward to this conversation because, Stacek and I were sitting right there and we were watching Mark, and I'm like, I just leaned over to him and I said, this is my belief. This is just where I believe that if you're not thinking about this, if you're building a team, if you're not thinking about this, if this is not part of your vision, you're not thinking about it the right way. And so, man, really looking forward to unpacking everything.
To be on, man. I mean, it's my favorite thing to talk about. I feel like people in this journey that I've gone in the investment space, and I'm going to talk to the guys today about an ebook that I just finished. So you guys will be the first one who can download it for free. You'll get that today. But it's just, it's a way of life. And so you got to understand that investor doesn't mean that you own something that makes you money. It's a way of thought, right? Because are you the type of person that thinks about ROI? Do you understand what a cost and what an investment is? Do you understand the difference between those things? And being a part of EXP, I realized that it's the investor agents that win, right? It's the ones that naturally have a path for growth. You have to have massive faith to be an investor. You have to have a certain amount of discipline to be an investor. Like, this is a way of life. It's not just like, do you own some property? Do you own some stock? Do you want to? And I was like, oh, wow, there's a bigger subject here, right? This is actually who I am versus just like a thing we do. And that's kind of what I go into in the book. And, I'm not necessarily giving investment advice in the book, but I am giving thought process. It's a mindset playbook, right? Because when you start realizing, oh, this is how we win, right? So if you were thinking more multiples, if you were thinking like, hey, if I'm going to spend this much years building this brokerage just to get what we sold it for, right? You would have been, wait a minute, if I understood it, listen, the most valuable asset that we all own already is time. So if you knew that with that amount of investment in time and effort, you were going to get X, you would have probably done something different, right? Or you would have spent it somewhere else. So that's the whole point of the whole thing, man.
Yeah. And you look at, buyback Buy Back Your Time. Dan Martell's book is one of my like the one that I've been pushing the most lately to a lot of people. And if you understand the who not how concept, then I think Martell's, Buy Back Your Time is the actionable playbook to really, unpack that concept all the way. And he talks about it in there, right? We trade, time for money, then we trade money for time. But that third step is money for money. And you mentioned, stocks, and you mentioned, other real estate. But the one that I also think is a huge opportunity to be thinking about is other businesses. And so, kind of, talk about the passion project. I mean, I'd be so interested to hear about this bourbon opportunity that you and Voss and our very dear friend, Mr. Nick Nanton. I know Kurt Chewell is a part of it, of what you guys are doing with the bourbon, man. That's like, yeah, I can get behind that.
It's the funnest. It's probably going to be the funnest one that I've got. But funny enough, I'll take you back. So about 3 years ago, you were probably there. I don't know if you remember when we had one of the conferences that Flick, Rob Flick in Puerto Vallarta. So Rob Flick's friend, a guy named Dave Steck, stood on stage and he spoke, and I approached him after and said, "Hey man, I really love what you're talking about, like his philosophy about investing in life and all these different things." Long story short, he ended up starting a mastermind group called Access. I became a part of that. Rob Flick's part of it. And they introduced me to investing in early stage companies. So like that was an investment that I really didn't have access to, right? It wasn't, I didn't have Silicon Valley connections and things like that. So that's where kind of I started to think, oh man, I really love this because I'm investing in people, like we're meeting the founders. These are past founders that have had massive success. I'm listening to their story. I'm seeing how smart they are. Now they're starting a new venture and we get a chance to get in early. The other thing that excited me about it is just the multiples, right? Like, of course it's more risky, but you got the right technology company and, your 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever it is, can turn into something really special. You have to be disciplined and patient, but it does. So leading forward, like right now, I only own this condo that you see, like real estate wise, like me and Gil sold a commercial property last year, which was incredible, by the way. Like I think commercial is a big investment opportunity coming. But all I own in real estate now is this condo. And then I own like a piece of 5 companies. And one of those companies is the bourbon thing. The bourbon, I would say like, it's the funnest, but the one I probably know least about. So I'm going to talk a little bit in my chapter, my book, Make Great Bets, Don't Gamble. I would lean towards this being slightly more of a gamble, but I'm betting on Nick Nanton, right? So at the end of the day, like you and I both know Nick, and Nick is just a master marketer. And obviously having Chris Voss involved in it is incredible. So basically Nick came to me and said, "Hey, listen, a couple of years ago, I was I was talking to Chris Voss and I said to him, listen, you love bourbon. I love bourbon. Why don't we start a bourbon company?" And, Nick's like, we should call it The Difference. And the tagline is going to be never split, always share.
I love it.
And I was like, and so like Voss is like, dude, I love it. Let's do it. Right. But Nick's like, okay, well, hold on. Cause I don't actually know how to do bourbon. So like, let's get the right players in here. So it took him about 2 years. But we partnered up with a guy named Roy, who actually makes the bourbon. We're going to Kentucky actually mid-October to go do a barrel picking and all that stuff. And Nick's like, listen, I want 25 guys involved. Here's the investment. And honestly, it's like, we want people we'd like to drink bourbon with, and that it can almost be a mastermind in itself. And it's funny because I told Nick, I'm like, you're onto something here, right? Because we can take a riskier investment like this and make it more of a mastermind. For instance, I pay the same a year as I'm paying to be a part of this investment, to be a part of a mastermind, and I don't get an investment with it. So like, wouldn't it be cool to form a circle of 25, girls and boys who are very successful, who have wealth, and it could be like have these kind of mastermind experiences events. So that's how it started. I think we've got our 25, and we're taking it step by step. But Nick's master marketer. We've already got really cool marketing behind it. It's being made by like same distillery. I think make like one called Whedon's or whatever. We tried it when we were up in Beverly Hills, but like we're going to taste it for the first time in a couple months. So I'm just super excited about that. And I've never had a product like this is I've never had a product to be like, oh, I'm part of that product. Like, you should try this product. like,
Yeah.
and I'm proud of this product. So I'm very, very excited about that. And we'll see. So, it's an investment in my portfolio, but honestly, it's early stages. And when stuff like that, you're looking at, 3 to 7 years to see something special happen. Right. So you have to understand that when you're going into it, that, to build something with a high multiple, you're going to be in it for a little bit, unless you get lucky on some crypto or something,
Right. Yeah, no, to that point, most people, it's bet on the jockey. And, we've seen it in the real estate space, right? So like with Howard, right? With Howard Taker. So you remember, he had Tiger Leads, and, he was the first one that I ever heard, right? He was kind of the early pioneer of, the internet, home search internet platforms. He was kind of the pioneer of that. And the way he did it smart. He built it up. He got all the influencers in the real estate game, and he made an exit. Good for him. Well, he was on a non-compete, and then obviously comes Dwayne Legate, right? Dwayne has all of his motivated seller stuff, and then he starts this shitty platform called Commissions Inc. And he did just the incredible. He listened and he executed better than anybody I've ever seen. And then of course he was able to exit for 250 plus million. And what I've always understood by seeing Howard, and then Howard comes back with YLOPO, and people are asking, hey, should we take a look at YLOPO? I said, is Howard Taker's involved? Yes, you go look at it.
Right.
If Dwayne Legate ever gets back in the game, then you go look at whatever Dwayne's doing. You bet on, you bet on, you bet on the jockey. And Nick is a jockey that I would bet on 10 times out of 10.
Right. Exactly right. And I talk about that in the book, about, fewer better deals with fewer better people, and how you analyze these investments. And honestly, if the first thing you analyze is who's running this thing, right? And if that does not check, you can walk away from that immediately. You don't have to do the other betting, right? Because if you don't get that feel, right? If I'm not like, Kitchenson's a guy, he's done it before. He's got a guy with integrity. He's a guy I like, then if those boxes aren't checked, then you have to start saying, hey, look, it's too risky, right. Unless, there's some other mitigating factors, but I think the team is the most important for sure.
100%. It's the who factor first, right? Jim Collins talks about it all the time. Who, then you can go to everything else. And we understand, even like with theory of constraints, you got the what, the how, the who. The who is always the biggest constraint. And so it's really, leaning in there, man. Hey, I'm excited. Let's dive in, man. Let's jump in. I'm going to go ahead and share this. I'm going to tweak this up so we got a little bit better view.
All right.
And then I'm going to let you take us through it. And man, whatever questions we got, I'll
good stuff.
I'm curious here. So we're going.
So first and foremost, like Investor Season was, just to give you a little background. Investor Season was initially a presentation that I was starting to. About 2 years ago, I started doing a presentation to agents called Investor Season, and it was called like Learn the Investor, Be the Investor. Why? Because as part of these mastermind groups, as we're watching data, cycles are cycles, and they have certain data, right? And you could start to feel that things were shifting economically, that things were shifting. I was letting people know, like, it's about to be investor season, guys. Like, something's going to happen. Like, I'm not telling you it's going to look like 07, but something's happening, right? And so little by little, I started to kind of preach this thing. But then what happened is, as I was starting to do this and thinking about agent attraction, I started thinking about some of the people that, are crushing in our office. You guys recognize some of these guys, obviously Collier's, in there, but all these guys are in our office in Orlando. And when I look around at these guys, I started thinking to myself, like, because, anybody who's been in agent attraction has been like frustrated with like, trying to do all this recruiting, and you get these people that just don't have the fire, or they like, you do all this work, they sign on and they're gone a month later. And it's like, and I just got to this point where I was like, who's my avatar? Who's winning in my office? And then I just need to replicate that. And I realized that all these people that you see came either from an investment background or came in with the intention of investing in real estate. And I was like, oh my gosh, my avatar is the investor agent. It's an agent that understands the principles of ROI, that has a passion for growth, that not only wants things for themselves, but wants to invest it forward. right? And these are these guys. Like if you guys have met some of these guys in EXP, I mean, obviously you guys know Collier and things like that. But when you meet Deontay, when we meet these guys, like they are invested forward type of folks and forward looking. So I
Hey,
realized,
Bobby, real quick. So I want to interject a point what you just said right there, because not a lot of people pick up on this. So, business is about getting people results. And so you're in the business of people, and there's typically two types of people. And then there's an A and B of the second type. The first person is what you're talking about, the ROI person. Okay. Not everybody is an ROI person. And I think that people need to understand that, because like if I click ROI and I'm talking to you and I'm like, well, why don't you get it? That's just not your person. They don't understand ROI. The other is pain and pleasure. And so you can help people move, closer to their pleasures, or you can help them move away from their pain. I always say, if you're playing the pain pleasure game, right, it's be a vitamin or be a painkiller. Vitamins are great, but when you ain't got no money, you ain't paying for no vitamins. Right. But if you ain't got no money, it means you got a pain, and you will run through this brick wall to remove that pain. So you're either, in my mind, you go after the ROI, people that get ROI, or you go after, people that are trying to move away from pain. I want to make that distinction for a lot of people, because they don't pick up on it, because they'll listen to this and be like, oh, I got it. And then they go to try to talk to somebody about ROI, and it's like deer in the headlights. And it's like, oh, you're a pain pleasure person. You're not an ROI person.
Right. And I'm always like, everything you do is preparing you for the next level. I've always been that type of person that I understand that there's value to things that you can't put a monetary value on, right? Like experience, or, investing in somebody else, investing in relationships, right? Relationships have a huge ROI. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be, but if you're an ROI investor agent type of person, you understand that relationships do have an ROI, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't have to convince you of that, like my boy Mike Reese says, I'm not in the belief business, right? Like we don't have to be in the belief business. They're either that kind of an investor agent that thinks this way or not. And so I broke it down, the investor life, and I realized that it's kind of three parts, right? There's a mindset. We talked a little bit about how an investor agent or investor thinks. There's actually a strategy. So we're going to talk about strategy in the book, because you got to have a thought framework for how you look at things, or, you could get burnt in this game, right? And there's always risk, right? And then there's a spiritual aspect, which is a part that a lot of people don't talk about. Like, I go in the last chapter, I said, God wants you to invest. And it's a biblical principle if you actually read it again and realize that investing is part of our story, right? So the book is called Get Your Head in the Game, a mindset playbook for the investor life. And I love starting it with this. I don't know if you're a fan of the movie Rounders like I am, but have you've seen it? I'm sure, Kitchens.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So one of the lines that Matt Damon says in the movie says, you can't lose what you don't put in the middle, but you can't win much either. And what he was talking about was there was another poker player that was a grinder, right? He was like, hey, listen, I just grind it out, man. And just, I'm just trying to feed my family, whatever. But, there's a time in your life where you're going to have to realize that if you want the things you want in life, you're going to have to put some chips in the middle, because, you can grind it out if you want to, but that ain't much of a life, right? And you can't win much that way. So before I kind of get into it, anybody who's watching, if you want to scan this code, anybody who's going to EXPCon, okay? Anybody who's going to EXPCon, we're doing a special lunch for investor agents. So if you're an agent that works with investors and you want to learn how to get great money sources for your investors so you can do more deals, on the 28th, we're doing a 11:30 to 1:30, like a luncheon, and it's walking distance from the convention center. So we made it super easy. Scan this. Obviously, it's free, but it's for investor agents. In other words, we're looking for agents that are already doing business with investors to come through. There's only about 30 spots, but this is the first time we're dropping it. Honey Badger Nation gets first look. So that's that. Okay.
Hey, Bobby, so, after we get done with this, take that and post it back into the Honey Badger group, actually, and tag me in it and say, hey, Kitchen said I could post this. Just want to let you guys know if you're interested. So go ahead and put that in the Honey Badger group as well.
Will do, man. Will do. So they're 10 plays. So I call it a playbook, right? It's 10 plays. So play one is wealth is not something you do. It's something you become, right? So you have to become somebody different oftentimes. And sometimes it's hard for us to admit that we might not be the person we need to be wealthy. But the good thing is that we're born for evolution and we can change, right? And this kind of hit home to me when I was at a Tony Robbins event and the guy said, I'm not a big materialistic guy, but but I love watches. right? And, you know, sometimes people are like, why do you need like a $30,000 watch, $50,000 watch or whatever? And he's like, well, I don't need it. But every time I look at this watch, I think to myself, who I had to become to afford this watch.
Mm-hmm.
And when he said that, I was like, man, you got to become somebody different, right? Like the things you have to do as an entrepreneur, the things you have to do as an investor, the kind of faith and discipline that you have to have is something that you have to become if you're not that person already, right? So, you know, this kind of came in messed up because I sent it to you the PowerPoint. But you know, one thing I believe is that wealth is an area of study. So everybody watching out there, guys, like, this is not something you should take lightly because this is your life. Like at the end of the day, you want to be financially free. That's what we preach, you know? And so you got to be picking up those books. You know, you know, you love books just like I do, coach. And I'm, you know, I love Psychology of Money. I just reread twice. Like I'm
so good.
So good. You know, like I'm just devouring this because I'm formulating a mindset and a strategy so I can see opportunities, that I can say yes to the right things and say no to things I should say no to, right? The other thing is money is simply a tool, right? We have these feelings and emotions about money. It's just a tool, right? You can do something great with it. You can do something terrible with it. It all depends on the person who has it. And money doesn't always equal wealth, right? So realize that there's many people that have a lot of money, but aren't actually spiritually happy. They're not happy in their lives. So you got to understand that there's value to other things. And one great example is this, another movie. I don't know if you've ever seen Bronx.
Yeah, so good, dude. Yeah, Leanne was telling me about this. I never watched it, and she's like, "Bro, you got to watch this movie,
bro." And it's funny because people used to tell me I look like this guy.
Yeah.
But basically, you know, I show this because there was a scene in the movie, if you watched it recently, right, where he's standing with the mafia boss guy, and this guy walks across the street. He starts shouting to the guy across the street. He's like, "Yo, where are you going? Where's my money? Blah blah blah." He's shouting, and then mafia boss is like, "Dude, relax." And he's like, "What do you mean relax?" He goes, "The guy owes me $20. He goes, "Bro," he goes, "You paid $20 to get rid of that guy." And so you have to understand that other things have value, right? Like I was literally with a client yesterday helping him, and she's going through a divorce, she's going through these things, and like you have to put value on things like peace, right? That has a value. I'll pay for peace, right? I'll pay to not chase a guy for $20. Like I'll chase to not have a guy who takes $20 from me and doesn't pay me back as a friend. I just paid some money to learn that lesson. I got something for my money that had an ROI for me, but you have to have a mindset to see that. So I'll leave it there in case you have some questions about that.
Yeah. So I just texted you. I don't know if you saw this. It was on Bet David. I shared it with you. Watch it later if you haven't seen it. I just texted to you, Bobby. So Bet David kind of had a aha moment last weekend with his kids. And it was the very first thing that you said there of, you know, what do you study, right? Like books, what are you going down? And he had an aha at his son's soccer match. And he said, as soon as the match started, he knew something was different. And he was like, something's different here. Something's different with this team. And he got over to one of the parents of the other team and is like, what's going on here? Like, y'all are different. Like, what do you do? Right. And he goes in, he's like, we don't practice, we train. Like, okay, who's your coach? Well, he looked him up. He's like top 10 scorer, you know, in history. Then he goes, you know, just every little thing. And he had that, Bet David goes, the realization. He goes, there's 3 types of people. There's the interested, there's the committed, and then there's the obsessed. And I think what we're seeing right now with a lot of real estate agents is we have a lot of interested real estate agents, but they're exiting the business because, you know, you got to be committed, but to thrive, you got to be obsessed. And man, it was just like I watched that thing like 10 times. I was like, my goodness, like you'll dig it as soon as you watch it.
I can't wait. And by the way, guys, this is what happens during investor season. So part of the reason I did this is because I was in the game when the market crashed last time. And so I saw both sides of the coin, right? I saw people win big. I saw people lose big. But one thing I understood is that these are only bad times for people who aren't prepared, right? There's a scared and there's prepared. And so understand that like people falling out, like you don't need to get scared about that. That's what happens during investor season. Like when it gets tough, we figure out who the soldiers are. So that brings me to play 2, which is be a long game player, right? To, you know, everybody knows the story about the tortoise and the hare. And when I was younger, I would hear the story and think, you know, the moral was slow and steady wins the race. And, you know, in my mind, I was like, who wants to be slow and steady? Like, you know, when you're young, you're like, why don't we slow and steady, right?
I'm fast. I want to go faster.
I want to go fast, right? But when you read the story, what I realized over time was, no, it's not about speed. It was the fact that the turtle was a long game player.
Yeah.
The turtle understood that he had to take these small steps every day in order to get towards a goal. And he had to just, and it didn't have to be anything spectacular, but he understood this is where I'm going. And I have to have enough discipline and faith to follow this path. And that's what long game players do. So I put this up because, you know, this was, I think, in the Psychology of Money when he talked about this, is like, you know, we talk a lot about things and stuff like that. And it's like, you see somebody with something expensive, like a car, and you think, oh, well, you know, they must be wealthy, right? But like what he says in the book is like, the only thing, you know, like this is like $400,000 car, right? And it, like, the only thing, you know, when you see somebody in this car is that they're $400,000 less wealthy. That's all you know, right? Because anybody can make a payment. But the point being is that a long game player employs things like delayed gratification, like literally had an agent walk in with this purse, and she's so happy about this purse, and it's like, and I you know, I know her, so I love her to death, and you know, she's producing, but like, I was scared to ask her how much she paid for the purse,
Right.
and I was hoping she meant 1,750, which I still wouldn't pay for a purse, but it was like 17,500 for the purse, and I'm like, what could we do? Like, my thing is that I want you to have the purse, but I want you to have as many as you want.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to have delayed gratification, and you have to understand what exponential curves look like. Because if you don't, what happens is you'll quit during what I call the shitty part of the curve, right? When the growth is slower, when there's setbacks and things like that. So a long game player understands that, like, at the beginning, it's going to look like this, but eventually you hit the exponential growth, right? That's when compounding kicks in, and compounding could be something with stocks or just compounding in life, right? Right now, we're all compounding our experience, our education level. We're compounding relationships. We're compounding all these things. And like, just because it's not moving as fast as you like, you have to understand what the curve looks like. And, you know, I told this story, not in the book, but this is one that I pulled off. I think it was Psychology of Money, or one of his books, where he talked about this prisoner of war. Like, there was another, you know, besides John McCain, this guy was one of the highest ranking prisoners of war. And, you know, the guy was interviewing him, and he was like, hey man, he's like, you know, I'm sure it was really depressing in there, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. He's like, did you think you were actually coming home? He's like, oh yeah, man. He's like, I wasn't depressed. I always knew I was going to go home. He's like, and this guy was being tortured every day. He thought about committing suicide, so he wouldn't tell secrets, but he was like, I always knew I was going home. And he's like, man, that sounds like really kind of super positive, you know? And he's like, well, what were the guys thinking that didn't make it home? He goes, oh, I could tell you that. He goes, those are the guys that thought they were going home by Christmas.
Yeah.
And so this idea that, hey, we're going home, but it might not be my Christmas. So you got to be a long game player. Right. And so that brings me to play 3. I don't know if you have anything, you know, on that particular.
No, I mean, you're so spot on, right? Like, even on the endurance side of things with me, it's like you can't be thinking about, man, as soon as I get up here, I'm going to stop. As soon as I get up here, I'm going to stop. You just, because if you put that false finish line in your head, man, and that finish line is like, just the goalpost just moved, the finish line just moved, you know, 4 miles down the road. You want to quit. Right. But if you just keep going, then and just keep moving, the finish line will eventually come, but you don't even think about it. You just keep moving.
Right. Exactly. Right. And so play 3 is your best first investment. And I'm sure a lot of people can guess what I tell people that is, but it's kind of came up when, you know, agents would come up to me and they would say, you know, they always ask me, like, you know, what, I made a little bit of money in real estate. What should I invest in? And a lot of times it's not a lot of capital. So like, you know, what I say your best first investment is when they come to me and they're like, oh, you know, I got 10,000 or 5,000. I said, the best first investment is you, right? There's nothing that has a better ROI than you. So, you know, years ago, I had somebody tell me that I should go to a Tony Robbins event, right? And I finally invested the money to go to a live event versus just read books. And it changed my entire life. Like, the ROI on that was ridiculous, right? So you have to understand that those things have an ROI. And, you know, when you invest in, you can, you know, one thing I've seen you do over the years is absolutely invest in health. Like really, you know, you got to be around if you're going to enjoy your wealth, right? You know, investing in education. These are the seminars, the conferences, investing in relationships. And that to me has one of the highest ROIs, you know, of all time. And that's how I built my entire career. That's how I built my life. Like every great opportunity I've ever gotten in my life has come through a human being, and great human beings like Coach Kitchens, great human beings like Collier, great human beings like Nick Nanton, right? So relationships have a massive ROI. Invest in those. Meaning, for instance, this group access, I paid, it cost me more than my mortgage to be a part of this group.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you right now, that was not an easy thing for me to do. I don't know if you guys I happen to be Jewish and Puerto Rican at the same time. So, you know, I'm a Jew Rican. So, you know, these things are hard. Like, you know, when somebody's like, hey, you're going to spend this much money to get this, right? And there's not a, you know, initial, like, there's not a guaranteed return of anything, but you understand that, like, I understand that there's a value in being a room full of millionaires. This just happened recently. I went to a conference in Puerto Rico. I'm thinking about moving to Puerto Rico, at least for half the year, in the next 12, 24. As you guys know, I'm from there. So it's different for me. I actually want to go back there because I miss it. But like ended up meeting this lady because I paid to go to a conference. I said, you know what? I'm not waiting for people to introduce me to entrepreneurs and investors. I'm going to find a conference. I found one. It was a global entrepreneurship conference that happened to be in Puerto Rico. Went there and met the director of an incubator. And now I'm going back on the 14th to be on a Shark Tank panel for them to see like pitches from companies. And like, I did that just by raising my hand and asking a question at a seminar, because I'm gonna tell you, pro tip, guys, when you go to these events and there's a chance to ask a question,
ask questions.
Always ask a question. The whole room, it's the way to meet the whole room in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
They will all know somebody's gonna approach you in the lobby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you ask a great question, you'll do that. So that's pro tip. And guess what, guys? You got a great investment coming up. If you guys haven't bought your tickets to EXPCon, you should do it. So I don't know if you have anything on that in particular.
Spot on. Yeah.
Okay. Play 4. Make great bets, don't gamble. So we started talking about the bourbon. Like I said, when I said make great bets, don't gamble, you know, I consider, because I'm not an expert in the bourbon game, I consider this more of a gamble, because I know, I try to know as much as I can about what I'm doing. And I use a story of when, you know, I was in a situation, you know, in the late 2000s, you know, when the market was crashing, where I literally lost my house, lost my car, you know, and filed bankruptcy. But before I filed bankruptcy, like I was looking for this last ditch effort to try to save myself from this, you know, trap that I was in. Right. So I meet this guy, and this guy comes and tells me he's got some kind of like clothing investment. Like he's like, oh man, he's like, I got this great clothing investment, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I take clothes from South America, and because our seasons are different, I buy it cheap there, I sell it here, blah, blah. It sounded all great. But the reality is, I don't even remember how I met this guy. All I knew is I was desperate to get out. So I decided to max out my last credit card and give this guy $35,000. Right. Well, I'll give you three guesses, but you're only going to need one as to what happened next. So
you never saw him again.
You know, at first I did, right? He was on the phone, was telling me it was going to work out, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, and so that's a pure gamble, guys. So what's important about that is you have to have a framework for how you vet investments, right? And so, and we talked a little bit about it, like the team, you know, you have to know who's running the team. You got to ask great questions. Have you done this before? Who else has invested? Right? Can I talk to them? Can, you know, like show me the operation. like you've got to do that research and data. And I find so many times I did it. I've done it. I just did it in that example, but I've done it myself where I just don't get it, you know, and then I go in. So now as a more seasoned investor, as somebody who's lost enough, I can now tell you that you got to come up with a framework. Right? Where these are my investment principles, and it's okay to walk away, right? There's always going to be more investments, but don't get wiped out because you purely gambled, right? There's always going to be risk, coach. You know, there's always going to be risk.
Always.
But you do your best to de-risk, and then you make a great bet if it's a good investment. But gambling is kind of like, oh, sounds good.
Yeah.
I don't understand crypto, but here it is. I'm putting it all in there, and I see what happens. Right. So I don't know if you had some experience like that.
Always. I mean, I think we all have, right? We get duped. We get, we really like the person, right? They connect with us. They make us feel special. They make us feel a certain way, and they sell us. And I think it's the lack of discipline of going back to that process or not having a process. And I think where I've myself had been taken advantage of was not having a process, or then having the process but not following it.
Right. Right. And it's almost every time you go away from your principles, right?
Yeah.
You end up losing, right? So and this brings me to the next thing, which is timing, right? So, investing is hard, not only because you have to be great at vetting things, but you have to know whether, it could be a good investment at the wrong time, right?
Yeah.
So I'll take you back to 2002 when I started my real estate career, right? In 2002, guess what was happening? Very similar to a couple of years ago, right? Rates are historical lows. There was cheap money out there. But the thing that was crazy was these loans that we were making. And I was a loan officer at the time. I know all about these loans, bro. There was loans out there that were 125% LTV. I shit you not. Wow. There was loans that were that like. Yeah. So we were in it, right? But I tell you all this because when that market crashed, not everybody lost. Some people won really big because they understood timing. So Dave Steck, the guy that runs Access, he says number one rule of investing is timing, right? So when you think about if you would have bought properties in let's say you bought properties in 2002, right? When this kind of thing started, right? And you bought 10 properties at 250 and they started rising. They're at 350, 375, some of them up 400, whatever the case may be. So you got massive equity, right? And what happens is you get lulled into thinking that everything just always goes up, right? So, but then you get a smart, old, wiser man that says to you, and I had this guy that just didn't listen to him, who says, hey, you got a ton of equity in your properties right now. Now it's like 2005-ish. And he's like, there seems to be signals that this can't last forever, right? Which nothing ever does. So I think it would be wise for you to sell those properties, right? Now, if you were smart enough to listen to that man, you would have instantly become a millionaire because you bought 10 properties. You have at least $100,000 of equity and you would have been a millionaire. But not only that, you would have had the capital to capitalize on what was coming next. If you would have timed it properly. And by the way, real estate's one of the few things you can time properly because it doesn't move fast. You can't tell me why stock dropped 50% today, but I can tell you that in the next 6 months, this is probably going to start happening in real estate, right? Yes. And you can start making moves. So my mentor, Dave Steck, the guy that runs Access, he stood in front of a room in 2005 at Harvard, and he gave a talk. And he said, hey, guys, I think the market's going to crash. I'm taking all my money out of real estate. And after it implodes, I'm going really heavy into Las Vegas real estate and win big. And they laughed him off the stage. And sure enough, it's exactly what happened. He went in, bought properties at a 60% discount, then started private lending, and now he's worth $100 million. And that was all having to do with timing. So he always says, you're better off getting out at or near the top. Don't wait till the top and then get too late and now you're over the top. Listen, if there's still 20, you think there's still 20% upside, but 80% downside, get out.
Yeah.
Get out, right? So these are all about timing. So when I say watch the clock, it's a football term, right? Like you play the game different depending on what the situation is in the game. So like I could tell you right now that like it's hard. I know something's going on, but like I don't quite understand it yet. So I'm in a phase, me personally, where I'm like, I'd rather keep some capital on the side and just wait a little bit to kind of see how things shift, especially in the commercial market, which I like.
Yeah.
And what I tell real estate agents, all you real estate agents out there, you're like, oh man, like I'm new to investing, but I want to invest. Play 6 is exactly all you need to focus on right now, which is stacking chips. Like what I'm telling you is there's going to be more opportunity coming in investor season. And the problem with most people is that when the opportunity comes, they ain't ready. So guys, just focus on selling a shit ton of real estate. Focus on getting capital in your bank. Gil and I sold a property last year, which helped me a ton, like to put capital. And what I mean by capital, I want you to distinguish between the two. Income is something that usually comes in kind of slow and monthly. capital, my primitive term is a chunk.
Yeah.
Right. And what's cool about real estate, you can make chunks at one time, right? Like there's people making 40, 50, $60,000 and $100,000 a month. Like you can stack big chunks of capital because the bigger your bets get, the bigger the returns get. Right. I love this, this thing, where it was a documentary they did on like Netflix where they do like these 30-minute things where they explain certain things, and one was called Billionaire. So obviously I'm watching it, right? And so and the guy says, turning $10, turning $100 into $110 is hard work, right? First of all, you probably won't even invest that because you probably need the $100, right? Yeah. So it's really hard to turn $100 into $110, but turning 100 million into 110 million is inevitable, because with that kind of capital momentum, a 10% return gets you to that. You can do that while you sleep. There's safe investments that'll get you 10%, 7 to 10%, right? So that's really important. The next one is play 7, which I call JOMO. And this, I love this term. I think you guys are going to love it. I start the chapter in the book talking about like, pretend like you're like walking out of a supermarket and you recognize somebody and it's like, oh my God, that's somebody I dated like 20 years ago. Right. And you're like, you kind of barely recognize them. Right. And, and then they see you and you start talking and, you're doing you think you're going to do the whole hi bye. Like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And they're like, but you say, how you doing? And you get more than you bargained for. Right. Yeah. You've
all been there.
Yeah. They're on their second divorce. They're, the kids from the first marriage, they don't get along. Then you try to switch the subject. Hey, what about your job? What are you doing for work? And, like, oh, I hate my job, and 5 minutes into this thing, you're trying to make your way out. Right. And you finally get away from them and you get in your car and you sit down and, you haven't turned the car on and you just kind of take that deep breath. And what you're feeling at that moment is JOMO, which is the joy of missing out.
Yeah.
And in investing, this term was also taught to me by Dave Steck, which I love, is joy of missing out, because a lot of times we talk about FOMO, and this is how you make bad decisions.
Yeah.
Right? Is your fear of missing out. You want to put your money in there. Hey, everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing this thing. And you know what? If it doesn't make sense, walk away. Right. And feel the joy. Hey, you know what? You might miss out on something, but trust and believe there'll be more things, right? But this guy right here, this guy helped us buy our first industrial property, which you see on the right-hand side. Me and Gil bought this with this guy. We were minor partners. This guy's wealthy, worth like 60 million. And I remember him when COVID hit, he taught me a lesson. He wasn't even trying to teach me. He's like, you know what, man? This was probably, I was talking to him maybe 2021. And he was like, you know what, man? I was private lending. I just took all my money out of the real estate. I just didn't know what was happening. And so I just wanted to keep my money safe. And somebody in his position, once you get a lot of capital, you're thinking about protection, right? Like, if you're younger and you're building up your stack, you're thinking more like growth. But these guys are like, I'm not going to lose my ass because there was a worldwide pandemic, right? And of course, some people would say he made the wrong bet there because actually real estate took off. Like we didn't know it was going to do that, but it took off. And some people might think he made a mistake, but I don't think he made a mistake. I think he went by his principles and he decided that it's too risky. I don't understand it. I'm taking my money out. But if he starts to feel in his heart that, oh man, I really missed out on that big real estate thing, guess what's going to happen next time? The next time that situation comes up again, he's going to go outside of his principles. He's going to bet the farm and then he's going to lose his ass. So this is the joy of missing out. You got to be okay with walking away, and it's okay. So that's the JOMO. Have you ever had something like that where you're like, oh, either I'm glad I walked away or I should have walked away?
Yeah, I think it's the as I was thinking as you were kind of talking about that and explaining it, to where I think we can all relate, to where the pain side of things, right? So it's like, damn, it was FOMO that got me in that situation, and and it's like, yeah, I did go against principles. I did go against my values. And so I think it's just a great reminder of a slight distinction, right? Distinctions are one of the most powerful things for us humans to be able to understand and have, right? Just how you frame that instead of the fear of missing out, it's the joy of missing out. And so it's always just a good reminder. It goes back to what you said earlier in the earlier plays. You've got to make sure that you're centered to your values, and you have a set of principles that it's probably the probability, of getting you into more trouble violating those principles than, the return of being able to have it. So no, that's so good, so powerful.
And don't get me wrong. If you guys want to have, there's times where you can go gamble, right? Like, but you do it with a minimum part. Like if you have a big stack, right? Like if you're wealthy, let's say I'm that guy, right? I have $60 million.
Right.
Me personally, I would gamble with $1 million of it. Like when I say gamble, I'd say, hey, you know what? I trust this friend. He's talking to me about this crypto play. I don't really understand it, but I'm willing to put some cash on it in case that hits. But I don't care about that 50 grand. Like if that goes away, I still have my lifestyle. I still have my stuff and safe stuff. Like I'm good. So I don't want you to think that you can never play that game, because I've done that. Actually, exactly what happened to me, but with a very smaller amount of money on crypto. Because I was like, you know what? I don't have any money. Let me just try that. But you know what ended up happening, bro? I was literally at a conference, and I found out from the guy on stage that it wasn't the coin, it was the exchange that went out of business. Like it's like saying the NASDAQ went under.
Right.
They're like, yeah, FTX is gone. And I'm like, wait, don't I have my coin in FTX? Gone. And that was a pure gamble, but I can live with that. I lost that money. That's gone, right?
Yeah.
Fewer better deals, fewer better people. We talked about this a little bit before. And so you got to know what to ask these folks when you're talking to them. So when you're investing or even recruiting agents, like, dude, like it's just about, I want to be around, if time is my most valuable asset, I want to be around great people. And if I want to elevate, I got to be around higher level people, right? If you're going to be investing, you have to ask questions. You can't be like, oh, I like them. That's cool. Hey, have they done this before? What are their results? Who else has invested in them? And do you like them? You know what? I'm getting too old to have assholes around me. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like no asshole policy. Like, I don't care. I don't care what you're offering. My time is too valuable to me to deal with that. So
that's a good thing too. Nick, we talked about Nick and Nick, has that principle from the Bezos letters, only hire people you admire. And I think it's just a great filter to run anything through. Right. So you gave some filters, some questions, some things to think about. And really what you're alluding to is really having, a decision-making process that stacks the odds in your favor the best that they can be stacked. And it's just like even hiring, right? There's no 100% guarantee on a hiring process, but not having a hiring process, it's a flip of a coin, right? If you're going to get a good person. So when you start putting in, filters, you start putting in questions, you start putting in check boxes, you start putting in certain things, then that stacks the probability, from 50 to 60 to 70 to 80, maybe 85, 90% that you're going to get a great hire. And so I think, your playbook here is just, so valuable in creating the filters to where it's no longer a gamble. It's more of a strategic play based upon probabilities and principles. And let me go through this, and just to the people component, that probably should be one of your questions. Do I admire this person? And so just little things like that, I think are super important as we, navigate whatever it is we're trying to navigate.
Yeah. And great for team leaders, I've running a team ain't easy. And I have a small team. I've had a bigger team. I have a smaller team, and this is like a leads team. Right. And it's like, I realized that I have to continually raise my standard as to what I allow to come onto the team, because it affects the culture as a whole. Right. So, having that standard, coach, we've been doing this long enough to know when somebody don't have a fire. And I'm just like, and there's so many times when I'm kind of going outside of my principle and gambling and saying, I kind of don't feel it from this person. I'll give him a shot. When it's like, it always ends up exactly the same.
It always ends up
the same. It's like,
always ends up the same way.
Always the same. So yeah, it's what I'm talking to you about, guys. I want you to understand this is applicable for your business and your life. Investing is just the fun part that makes the money, but understand that these are life principles, right? And here's one, play 9, start with the end in mind, right? So, and the reason I say this is because this happened to me yesterday. It happens to me all the time. Somebody will come up to me and say, hey, I've been researching Airbnbs. You think it's a good investment? And I'm like, I can't even answer that. Maybe, I don't know, because I don't know what you want yet. Yeah. Like, everybody's going to have a different investment story. And so, and you got to know what you want, so there's questions that this kind of got messed up, but here's the 4 questions I think you got to ask yourself to really figure out what you're trying to do. And I learned this with a Tony Robbins event when they actually made me write down like how much my expenses were, how much it would take for me to live like a good life, like, have fun with your buddies and go out to dinner and do all that stuff. And then what would it take to live that dream life, right? And once you got to that dream number, you can reverse engineer what you would have to have in, let's say, there's ways to put your money in a pretty safe investment that'll make you 7%, right? Like I got my money sitting in the money market, some money, and it right now is making darn near 5% just sitting there, right? So like you can get to 7, not too hard. So that's what we reversed engineered, and I realized it gave me the number I would need. Like, oh, I need to have, in my case at the time, I think my number to be living the life that I wanted to was $333,000 a year. So when we reverse engineered it, that means I would have to have $5.4 million, in like a 7% compounding account. And I was like, now I have this target, and it doesn't seem that unreachable. Like 5.4 will spit out this amount of money without me ever having to work. And I was like, okay, so now I have a target. So if you guys are thinking out there, like, okay, I want to invest, first, tell me how much you want.
What's the goal?
What's the goal? How much you want? Some people might tell you, hey, listen, if I'm making $10,000 a month in passive residual income in the next 10 years, I'm a happy person. Shit, I got crazy plans for that. But if you tell me you want 10 million, then we got to do different shit. Like, cause it's not going to stack that fast, especially if you're starting with small capital, right? You got to know when you want to get it. You got to know what you're willing to risk to get it. So, not everybody has the same risk aversion. Like, you have a family, you're not going to think the same way as me, who doesn't have a wife and kids. Like, I don't have a wife and kids. So I can make mistakes that don't affect my children. Right? So you need to think differently than me. Like, don't do exactly what I do. Right. And then what are you willing to do to get it? Right. And so when you come up with that kind of framework, then you have a target. Like, where do I want to be in 5? Where do I want to be in 10? How much do I want? And what am I willing to do? Because guess what? That, when you were saying we'd laugh as to what you sold the brokerage for, like it was, I'm assuming it wasn't a great number, right? That's what you were alluding to, right? Correct. So if you would have asked yourself these questions and you would have been like, okay, well, what kind of multiples do brokerages sell for? So, okay, so I want to make X amount, and I would say, okay, they sell for these type of multiples. So what kind of revenue has to be coming through this for me to get it to that multiple? And you might have found out that the math wasn't mathing. And you might have been like, whoop, we need to switch trajectories to do this, right? Now, obviously, it led us to EXP, so we good, right?
Hey,
but,
good.
But when you started with the EXP, didn't exist, right? So finally, this one, could be controversial. I don't know. I believe in God, and I read the Bible, and I've always thought this, that there's biblical principles to investing. And, if you read some of the parables, you'll see it's pretty apparent, right? And number one is, faith is a foundation of all great things, and including investing, right? You have to do things today that will pay off tomorrow. You're not going to see the result today. You have to have faith that if you do the right things, if you're that tortoise in that race, that you're going to put, if you just continue to do the right things and stack, that you're going to get that result that you want. But you have to do things today that are going to pay off down the road. And that takes a massive amount of faith. It takes a massive amount of discipline. So the fact that faith runs through spirituality, that faith runs through investing, faith is the foundation. It's the fabric of all great things. Everything in your life, every dream you had when you were thinking about running Ironman or whatever the case may be, it started with faith. It started with a vision, right? And then if you go deeper into the parables, you'll see, this is my favorite one, the parable of the talents, right? The master goes to three servants. He says, I'm leaving for a while. I'm going to leave some money with you guys. Now, funny enough, they call it talents, right? The money is called talents. And so he gives one, 5, he gives the other one 2, and he gives the other person 1. And it's funny because it says he gave them the amount of money according to their ability. And to me, that means that, you're not going to get what you're not prepared for. Right. So when I say that wealth is an area of study, like, you should really dive in so that you can be prepared to handle the amount of wealth that you want to have. Right. So he goes away for a while, the master, he comes back to his servants, and the one with 5 flipped his to 10, and the one with 2 flipped his to 4. So 100% return on both of those. Right. They bought some stuff, they flipped it. Right. The other one was scared. It was scared to do anything with their talent, and they buried it into the ground, and for safekeeping. So when the master came back and he saw, I was like, oh man, look at these 2 guys. They flipped the money. He praised them. He rewarded them. But when he saw the guy that was too scared to do anything with his talent, to do anything with his money, he not only chastised them, but he says, I'm throwing you out where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. It was like a really harsh punishment. And to me, that said, God appreciates an investor because it's faith-based, right? So yeah. God gives you 3 assets. He gives you time, talent, and treasure. And so my belief is that God himself is an investor, and his return is the impact we make on others, right? So he's given us these things to invest. Our job is to invest it forward and have an impact and have an ROI. And I kind of just end the book by saying, invest wisely. So, so here it is, by the way, guys. I'll put this also in the Honey Badger name, but I literally put this up today. Like, I was in a leadership meeting trying to get it onto the website so you guys could download it. Nobody has this yet. I worked on it for a while, but I was just putting some more pictures and stuff in it. But download the free book. I go into these principles more deeply, but yeah. And then, this is all in the same brand that I'm building called Investor Season LLC. So my new brand is essentially an investment brand. I'm focusing on investment sales and investment lending, including commercial lending. So right now I'm getting back into where I started in real estate, which I actually started with the money. Like, I started as a lender. And I just feel like there's such a big opportunity. There's not a lot of people that do commercial lending and do it well, or that have access to, now I have access to a platform where I can actually, send things out to like 700 lenders at one time digitally, which if you ever done anything in the commercial space, they are antiquated, but now I'm not. So that's the play. And that's part of that event that we're doing at EXP Con is going to be more focusing on hard money. But yeah, that's the play, man.
Dude, that's so good.
That's so what that's what I got.
Dude, amazing, man. And it's right in alignment with where this is where everybody's head must be. I really think, moving into the future and how you utilize your real estate business to truly build wealth. Right. And, I'm at a, 20 years this month, been associated with Kinder. And so just kind of reflective as a coach, if I was to go back and coach us knuckleheads 20 years ago, to 26, 27-year-old kids, I would have pressed hard on the vision, and I would have pressed hard on what it is that we were wanting to accomplish. And so at the time, and I think it's just an age and ego thing, being competitive, we wanted to be number one.
Right.
And when you chase the wrong goal, it takes you down a path that sometimes is really, really hard to unravel. And sometimes you can't just jump the lane. Sometimes you got to turn around and come all the way back to get on the right path. And, we chased status for so long that it eluded us to moving to freedom. And, to me, it's J. Cole, says it right. Like, what's it worth, sitting in first class if you can't take everybody with you. And so when you chase status for so long, you can't take everybody with you because you make sacrifices, you make dumb decisions. And Bette Davidowitz says it best, man. He's like, you got to go from scarcity. You got to hit status, but you got to make the jump to freedom as fast as you can. And so what I would coach us knucklehead 27-year-olds on, 20 years ago, I'd be like, change the vision, bro. Change the vision, boys. It needs to be, how can we utilize this business to get us to freedom? And then obviously, we wouldn't be here today. You and I would not be having this conversation if that would have happened. But what I would impress on everybody, that, captures this message is that design real estate, to me, your real estate sales and real estate business is the best vehicle to unlock and find opportunities in real estate, in commercial, in relationships of people that know opportunities that are out there, other businesses. And so really it's like designing your vehicle, because that's really all the business is. It's just a vehicle that you need to utilize, use the principles, the things that you're talking about in the playbook to get to freedom as fast as you can. And, I wish somebody would have smacked me across the head and gave us that advice 20 years ago.
Well, I gotta, I want to give a shout out to you, man. Cause you bring the heart to this, and you've been doing this for a long time, man. And it's cool that, I met you guys years ago when I was working with Nick Nanton, and I've seen so many evolutions, and then to come back full circle and be partners with you guys. But you in particular, brother, you always invest it forward, man. You have an investor heart, and we appreciate you for that, man. And you can't, we always wish we would have made a different decision, like
Sure.
This is the long game player thing I'm talking about. But like, I'm 45 now. A lot of young guys and girls in the office, and I try to impart that in them and say, guys, think in 10-year terms versus thinking in 2-year terms. Cause that's where I made the mistakes when I was in my 20s, because I was just trying to get there fast. Right. And that's when you gamble, instead of building it brick by brick. But it's tough to understand what's truly important. And the older you get, you start realizing that there's value to other things, right? You start realizing that time is actually your most valuable asset. You start realizing that you want that peace. You start realizing who you want to be around, right? And what you want to be doing every day. Hey, listen, one of my other concepts with, investor season is for the fourth quarter is now, right? And what that means is we don't know when the clock is going to be up for us. So we got to assume every day we wake up in the fourth quarter, right? Like and you play different in the fourth quarter, right? So if you're young out there, it doesn't mean you got time, so it's great to start diving in now. Don't wait. Don't be like, I got all the time in the world. You don't know. You don't know that. You got to start listening to guys like Kitchens. You got to start saying, hey, these guys have something valuable to say that I can actually speed me up 10 years in my thought process, so that I can start building the things that I want. So we appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. Really, embodying what this whole, series is all about, right? Just truly, individuals like yourself that just want to pour back into and make the community, make the industry, just make people better. And man, I can't thank you enough. And definitely any of you guys listening in, man, go get the book, get connected with Bobby D, and anything that we can do to help you guys. That's what we're here for. And look forward to catching you guys on the next episode. See ya. Thanks, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.